Welcome and thank you for listening. I'm Jonah Dempsey and we're going to be doing a human design analysis. So today we're doing one from a fan of the channel, LO, who is a 2-4 projector. And we're going to be just kind of doing a brief overview reading. So you'll hear I sometimes do 1 hour readings or hour and a half readings. This one I'm going to try to kind of cover the bases in 20 minutes or so. Now, LO already has some familiarity with human design, so this might all be kind of redundant, and I usually like to cater the readings to the level of understanding that a person has. So if they're already kind of experimenting with their strategy and authority, and if they're already kind of in the experiment and they know their centers, they know their channels and so on, I'll usually go into more detail of the lines. Or if they already know the lines, or the gates, for instance, then I'll do lines. If they know lines, I'll do color, and so on, kind of deeper and deeper. At the same time, it's really nice to just remember the surface and kind of just have this little synthesis of what we see at the surface. So looking at LO's chart, we see right away there's only one channel. So this is a person with a lot of openness. And when you have that much openness, it's really, really important, to have enough time away from others to decondition and to really feel yourself. When you have a lot of openness, I have a lot of openness in my chart. And personally speaking, I feel the need, like when I'm at a big conference or something, to go back to my hotel room twice a day to decompress. And I'm a generator. It's not even about an energy thing. It's just how much of other people's stuff I'm absorbing. So you see so much openness in the chart here. So much openness. You see that probably the strongest conditioning for this person is going to be their open solar plexus. And the reason I say that is that there's a not-self hierarchy. There is a hierarchy of conditioning from the strongest to the weakest. And the strongest conditioning of all of the not-self is the ego. But here's someone who has a defined ego. So here's someone who has a strong ego, who's not being conditioned by the not-self themes of the ego. But the second in line is the solar plexus. So I'm going to say that the absolute foundation of the not-self decision-making for this person is the solar plexus. This is the main issue. This is it. Remember, we're looking at a single definition chart. The single definition chart, the undefined centers are going to be the crux of the not-self. If you look at a split definition chart, you're going to see the bridge gates and so on. But for a single def, as well as for a triple split, as well as for a reflector with no definition, it's really about the centers. It's really about the centers. And so we see this kind of foundation of the not-self in the undefined solar plexus. So here's someone whose not-self theme is bitterness. And it's the bitterness of not being recognized as a transmitter. Not being recognized for that 4426. And that's also not being recognized for their ability to delegate and to hire, like as an HR manager, and to invest, and to work with material resources in order to increase wealth, to increase access to material resources. They're not recognized for their ability to support. And, that is where that bitterness comes from. Now, of course, some will recognize that. Some will. But the idea is to look at where that foundation of the not-self is. And here it's about not being recognized, and not being recognized for that innate frequency that they carry of the 4426. And The not self is going to be based in the solar plexus, saying, as long as you don't show them who you really are, you can avoid bitterness. As long as you don't rock the boat, you can avoid bitterness. As long as you avoid confrontation, you can avoid bitterness. As long as you can avoid truth, you can avoid bitterness. You get the idea here. The not self is going to be in that undefined solar plexus. I mean, it was the same for Ra. Ra Uru Hu. It was the same for him. Himself a transmitter. And it was the absolute same for him, where he also had his not self in his undefined solar plexus. And when he talked about it, he said, I was somebody who spent my whole life hiding from people, terrified for them to see who I really was. That is what you get with a single definition chart with an undefined solar plexus and a defined ego. A defined ego, right? If the ego were undefined, it'd be a whole different ball game. If the ego were undefined, it would be the proving game. It would be the self-esteem game and the stamina game and the guts game and the nerve game and the capacity game. I'll prove to you I have the capacity. I'll prove to you I have the stamina. I'll prove to you I have the guts, all that stuff. That's not here, right? Because here's somebody who actually does have the stamina. Doesn't have to prove it. Here's someone who actually does have the nerve. Doesn't have to prove it. Stamina, gate 21. Nerve, gate 26. And they're right there in the defined ego. But that undefined solar plexus, the packed undefined solar plexus, I can avoid bitterness as long as I don't show anyone who I really am. As long as I present a false self that's palatable to them, that doesn't confront them, that doesn't poke any hot buttons. It's about hiding. The undefined solar plexus is avoiding confrontation and truth. It's hiding. It's escapism. So there's the mind going, just don't show them. As long as you don't show them, you won't be bitter. And meanwhile, there's, 4 activations in the solar plexus. So much nervousness here. So much nervousness. Nervousness lives in the solar plexus, just as fear lives in the spleen and anxiety lives in the ajna. And here we have nervousness. The nervousness around having new experiences, gate 36. Nervousness around sex, gate 36 as well. It's a very sexual gate. Fear of sexual inadequacy. We see 37. The fear of tradition, the fear of breaking traditions, the fear of confronting traditions. What happens if I go against the tradition? My family won't be happy with me. My community won't be happy with me. So I'd better not confront the tradition. Better just go along with it. In gate 6, nervousness around intimacy. In gate 49, nervousness around possessions. Nervousness around providing material resources for someone and kind of this fear of that type of bond. We see 3 tribal and only 1 collective there. So we see a lot of nervousness around tribal things. And yet this is a tribal person. LO is someone who is tribal, who only has a tribal obligation. The obligation to support. Your only obligations are your definition. Your only obligations are your channels. We all feel all these obligations. Shouldn't we all be obligated to share? Shouldn't we all be obligated to empower? No, not at all. It's because the not self wants to be everything. The not self wants to be all 64 gates and all 9 centers and all 36 channels or however many, It wants it all. And it wants to have all of that obligation. But here's someone who's only obligated to support. This is a tribal person, obligated to support. And who does this person support? Those who recognize them. So the undefined G center is the next in that not self hierarchy. Because the strongest is the ego, the second strongest is the solar plexus, the third is the spleen, and the fourth strongest conditioning of the not self is the G center. And so the undefined G center, always searching, always looking, right? Trying to go out there and find it. But its grass is always greener because as soon as they're there, that undefined not self G center kicks in and says, what if there's something else out there? What if there's another person out there for me? What if there's another job out there for me? What if there's a better place out there for me? The undefined G center rule, people and place, and doubly important for projectors. Truly, doubly important for projectors. Because projectors aren't here to work. They're here for the people in their lives. And the undefined G center rule, people and place. You meet the right people at the right place. And the right people take you to the right places. So how do you do it if you're in the wrong place? Well, you don't. How do you do it if you've met the wrong people? You don't. You just don't. You can't. There's no way. There's no way. So it's so important. People and place and people and place and people and place. Undefined G center. This goes for everyone with an undefined G center. You have to be discerning about the people in your life and be discerning whether they're really correct for you. Where did you meet them? Did you meet them at your favorite restaurant? A place that feels like home? Or did you meet them under duress at a place where you felt uncomfortable, unsafe? When they take you places, are they taking you somewhere where you feel good? Or are they taking you someplace you feel uncomfortable? And this is the difficult thing. You might have a best friend for 20 years. And when you actually realize everyone they've introduced you to through their friend group is not really for you. They're not for you. They're not bad people, they're just not for you. And this is so important for a 2-4. Here we have a Hermit Opportunist. A Hermit Opportunist Splenic Ego Projector with an undefined G center. How important to meet the right forces, to have the right people, to have true allies in this life who recognize them. And it's those true allies who can actually reach them. Remember, the second line is hard to reach. It's hard to reach. So yeah, it's it's a thing. You have this 2-4 ego projector who has an undefined G center. And for a projector, it's about the people in your life. It's not about the work you do. It's the people. And so here's someone who might rather just be left alone. Leave me alone. And when someone comes knocking and tries to reach them, tries to penetrate their defenses, they get an illusion. They get the undefined solar plexus presenting what they think the other person wants to see. Besides, with gate 26, here's someone who has a fantastic knack for telling others what they want to hear. You know, if you have gate 26, this is the great bullshitter, and I don't mean that in a bad way. This is the gate that's smarmy and charming and nervy. And if you have gate 26 and you want to tell someone the truth, you tell them the second thing that pops into your head. The second, not the first. That's what Ra would always say. I have an undefined throat, so I sometimes pick up his mannerisms when I start to do these readings. I really enjoy it. But anyway, here's a very open chart. It's a very open chart. There's a tremendous ability to absorb the other and to be conditioned by them. And for the not self, this is a nightmare. But as soon as everything's given over to the spleen, really the spleen and the ego, as kind of co-authorities. I mean, this is someone who has splenic authority, sure, but they're also going to recognize it in their ego, what they have the energy for or not. But as soon as that is given over to the body, as soon as that 4426 is given the authority, as soon as that spleen is given the authority to whisper, as soon as that happens, it all changes. All that openness is no longer a bad thing. All that openness is no longer, the solar plexus is no longer a place of nervousness. I mean, sure, you feel it, but it's not you. It's not you anymore. And then it becomes the place of wisdom, right? So the undefined centers become places of wisdom. They become windows. We've all heard this in human design. You become wise. And it sounds like it's just some nice thing to say to somebody as a compensation for all their openness. It sounds like, oh geez, well, it's really bad you have all this, but at least you get to become wise. No, it's not about that. What it really means is you get to learn. You get to learn what these things are. I have undefined ego. I get to learn who's trustworthy or not. I get to learn whose heart is in it or not. If you have undefined spleen, you get to learn who's afraid. With undefined solar plexus, here's the capacity to be deeply empathic to the other, to really understand emotionally what they're going through, and really to learn what it means to savor, to really savor something, like savoring a meal. What does it mean to savor a sunset? What does it mean to savor a conversation? Maybe the last conversation you'll ever have with someone. And to really savor that conversation. This is the solar plexus. So, when I look, I see the battle for mental decision making versus inner authority, splenic decision making. And on the side of the spleen, you have essentially this ability to discern who's correct for you and who recognizes you. This person has that. And to be in the right place, and to be with the right people, and to be recognized, and thereby to be aligned. And on the other hand, there's the solar plexus, which is saying, don't show them. Don't tell them the truth. And there's the G center that says, keep looking. And there's all the rest. There's the ajna that says, try to be certain. And there's the head that says, keep being skeptical. I always love that, that crazy dichotomy where you have one not self-center, the ajna, telling you to be certain, and the other not self-center, the head, particularly when gate 63 is activated, saying, stay skeptical, don't believe it. I mean, how's that for a double bind? So that's what I see here. And and there's so much more beneath the surface. There's so much more. There's the hope, motivation, which for projectors is so valuable. The people in this person's life who say, well, is it possible? Could it happen? They will pull this person into hope. And the others who say, whose fault is it? And how are you going to fix it? Will pull to the transference to guilt. And they're not for them. That's what it's about. It's about allies. And being a 2-4 is not even karmic. It's not even karmic, This is personal destiny. But everyone has a need, has a real, everyone meets various forces in their life. And knowing who is for you and who isn't is part of it. And that's what this person gets to learn. With that undefined G center, is really getting to learn who's for them. And with that unconscious fourth line, who is really there. You know, a 2-4 is never going to really identify with the fourth line. A 1-4, a 2-4, they don't really understand their fourth line. They don't really know what it's all about. They don't really see, except maybe in hindsight, how important their network is, how important those opportunities are, how important it is that they get a return on investment. The people they're investing in have to be the right people and have to give back. As a projector, you're living on borrowed energy. You're living on gifted energy. Someone who invites you as a projector somewhere, not a real invitation unless it comes with energy. Thank you to Lavina Lovick, herself a 3-5 projector, for pointing this out. She had a great video. I mean, all of her videos are great, but she had a great video on projectors saying, hey, it's not a real invitation unless it comes with something, unless it comes with energy, unless it comes with money, unless it comes with resources, unless it comes with time. You know, it's all of these things are needed, and the real people, the real forces, the real allies, the people who are there for you will invite you in this way. And they will recognize your capacity to support. And they will recognize your understanding of how to make something economically feasible and viable. And they will understand your ability to transmit and surrender, right? Isn't that part of it? That's part of it too. So yeah, that's the surface. You know, that's a 20-minute version. You know, we can dig in for hours. Anyone who studied human design knows, you know, there's so much here. But the surface is really beautiful too. And it's nice to just take a walk through the centers. It's nice to just look at that openness, look at how that mind works, and then look at how the body works. Look at the form, right? And that's really it. It's to see the difference in those two, and to really see what's going on there, where there really is, you know, this kind of dual nature. We all possess a dual nature. And ultimately, human design is about aligning you to the form. It's deeply Taoist in that respect. It's deeply yin. It's about surrendering to the form, and all of this examination, all of this analysis is so good for giving you signposts that you're on the right track, for easing the mind's journey in its ongoing surrender to the form. All right, everybody, thanks for listening. Take care.